Welcome to the CyberSangha podcast. CyberSangha is a program of free live broadcasts, launched in 2009 by renowned teacher and author Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Join us as we draw on ancient Tibetan wisdom to discover how to connect with our best self and live to our highest potential. The following conversation, Stillness and Movement in Mindful Practice, happened on July 20th, 2024, as a science and spirituality dialogue with Ido Portal, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and Alejandro Chaoul. This was part of a year-long series of dialogues from 2024. This content is for informational purposes only. Listeners should consult medical professionals for any physical or mental health concerns. Please use headphones and do not meditate while driving or operating machinery.
My name is Alejandro Chaoul, and I'm delighted to host this CyberSangha event with our teacher Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche and our special guest Ido Portal. Today, actually, it's full moon, so some of our Sangha might be actually in the practice of full moon that we do every month and go all around the world in different languages doing this practice. And it's free, so you're welcome to join. In fact, CyberSangha was a brainchild of Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche to really bring different aspects of wisdom to the world with no boundaries, no physical boundaries. I mean, except you have to have connection, and free. And so Rinpoche brings teachings in English and Tibetan, and allows the space to have the full moon practices and these kinds of dialogues that I've been very fortunate to host. So most of you know Rinpoche, and he doesn't want to be much of introduced, but welcome, Rinpoche. It's always wonderful to have you in these dialogues. And today we bring our special guest, Ido Portal. And it's hard to really put all that Ido has done in a brief bio, but I'll do a little bit, and then through the dialogue, we'll get much more of what he has done and what he can bring to us. So Ido is a practitioner, a teacher, an educator, and consultant working with transformation and evolutional-based approach through really the medium of movement in various forms. He has really influences from Feldenkrais to capoeira, and other sorts of movements that he'll tell us. He also does a lot with athletes, and this is collaborates with the MLB, the NFL, the European Champions League soccer teams, and actors and dancers, musicians. So really a broad spectrum of movement. So really, Ido, welcome to CyberSangha.
Thank you very much.
So let me just start with kind of a simple question, which would be, what brought you, today we're working from stillness to movement, and in a way, the arc that I'm seeing is there's movement, there's stillness, and then there's kind of the movement that arises from stillness. Some of the words I've heard you say in interviews and so forth is about freeing the body, playfulness, and so forth. So if you want to tell us a little bit of how would you define this area of movement that you do?
The original experience, the beginning for me was as a child. So this is the first experience, I think, of living. It is experienced through movement, which is, of course, projected on some background, but there is no yet a recognition of it. And from there, an experience that keeps repeating. I've heard one Steve Paxton talk about it, a person who influenced a lot of the movement field and created contact improvisation. He said, I'm working with movement because I wanted to finish my physical development, which I wasn't allowed to finish as a child. And I feel very much the same. I grew up in a city and was sent to school, etc., sitting on chairs. Various aspects of the intellect and control and education come into the picture. And then that sent me back into the body. And from there, the next step was movement as a concept beyond the body as well, which also traces back all the way to that background, that base from which it arises as well. That was my journey.
Wonderful. And Rinpoche, in a sense, in the monastery, your training was a lot about stillness. And yet, movement is a big part of your life. And actually, lately, even very active movement. How has that come into your life, and how do you experience this importance of movement in our everyday life?
So first of all, thank you for joining our Facebook Live, and also all the Sangha member there. Many people are very much looking forward for today's conversation. And maybe I will answer what Alex is asking me, but also I wanted to ask you also a little bit more of your personal journey. I know, as you said, it started from this childhood, but a little bit more elaborating on it, on personal journey into the movement, now become part of your also professional life. So that will be wonderful. Yeah, so before our conversation here, we were talking off camera, and I was saying that Tibetan Bön Buddhist tradition, we train a lot our mind. We get a lot of explanation, theories about the mind, but then very often, in a practical sense, I see it is lacking in many Buddhist practitioners, lacking that aspect of the movement part of the body, because somehow I think, as Ido said, well put it, but body has certain level of expressions that requires it to be full and express it through its fullness of the body, which only happens through the movement, because of those levels of movement, those different parts of the body's movement, those kind of movement, those different sounds that coming out of those movement. If they are not fulfilled, body is not expressing itself fully or living itself fully. And we understand that very well in terms of the mind. We talk about Rishin, that every emotion needed to be expressed fully. And so regardless of good or bad, like if people say something like, if your child cannot express their anger fully, they cannot express their love fully. So that both spectrum of emotions needed to be fully expressed. Same way, every part of our body needed to be expressed fully. So in the Rushin practices, they say we go through 49 days. You need to be like a monkey. You need to be like a tiger. You need to be like a mouse, because expression where the lion moves, it's very different than where the mouse will run. Mouse will try to hide and find a hiding place in a very particular way. It will shrink quite a bit of its size of the body, but lion will express itself with the sound. And those lion in us we need to express those lion in us through a movement and through sound. We need to express those mouses in us, because otherwise you stick with this. If you cannot express with the movement and the sound, those mouses going to stay in you forever. You don't want these mouses to stay in you forever, right? So yeah, personal experiences is very much, and coming to the West, I realized that lack of the movement, and I've been, not at the level of either what you're doing, but clearly trying to go to do the Tsalung, do the yoga, go to the gym. And this summer retreat, I said, First time I took everybody 6:30 to 8 o'clock, hour and a half, anywhere from six miles every single day movement. You can see the moment you move, people are heart is breathing and you're smiling, they're talking, they're sharing. This changes everything rather than trying to feel a joy without any movement. So I think the movement is definitely key.
Beautiful, beautiful words. I'll trace back to your question about more kind of more specific background. I started in martial arts, in traditional martial arts, at 6 years old, something like that. And that was also one of the primary vehicles of movement for me. Again, the definitions, the concepts were not yet clear. I was very young. But can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because you disappeared a bit for a moment. So that was influencing very much the experience, and it lasted for a while. And around the age of 15, I saw this this phenomenon of capoeira. And that transformed things to a different level. And the reason why it created that is because capoeira is not something that can be categorized, for me at least, as a martial arts only. It is a cultural aspect that touches upon layers of ritual, practice, religious layers, and something that is happening outside with the people, for the people, and it can take phases of anywhere from great violence and even death, even murder, and all the way down to theatricality, a dense expression of joy, transmission of hidden messages, etc. And when I got into that, I didn't come from that culture. I had to learn the language. I had to learn everything. I had to learn music, percussion, and I had to learn acting, which is inside of it. I had to learn how to be in a cultural exchange. I had to understand the religious aspects, not coming from my personal religion, but from much more ancient religions originating in Africa that share a lot of commonalities with other ancient religions that are sometimes faded away and disappeared. So this really was a big step for me in opening my mind to the concept of movement and opening it much wider. There is a special word and an experience in capoeira that is called Axe. It's written A-X-E. And that word is a very special word. It touches upon layers and have parallels with the word lung. And our word in my original, in Hebrew language, ruach, we also use the same. We say wind, basically. The word for what we use for the spirit is actually wind. And for the soul, we use a different word. So that was also something that was happening, a phenomenon of a certain energetics that are changing in the body. And this touches something very interesting that you've just touched upon, Rinpoche. The conversation that is conducted between the body and the mind through the medium of emotions, almost as a reconciling factor, as a communicator, as a transmitter between body and mind. And I think a major problem that I realized with time was this abandonment of the body from one side, and from the other side, the traps of the body, the fact that it can trap us. But those traps were very different in context in older times, in ancient times, because the body had to be involved. Life was very physical. Just to have a sip of water or to survive the mountains, It was all, everybody were athletes, were movers, were survivors. So then this practice of the body became a centerpiece for me. And I always tell people that I come from a very cerebral background, and the Jewish kind of education and upbringing is a lot about the intellect and conversation and the discussion. But I found a major problem there with the way that we receive. We are corrupted by this. And the body never lies. It is always very honest. So that drew me more and more into this direction. And that was beautiful, the way that you describe the various animals as metaphors, but also as modes that actually these animals are within us in many ways. You have even various models mapping the evolutionary animal forms into us. So that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
So thank you, Ido. So so many things come to mind. So one is, as you said, kind of the Jewish background, which I'm also have a Jewish background, and that rational aspect, which actually drew me partly to Buddhism as well. And yet, this part of Ashe, the Ruach, the Lung, kind of this energy aspect of the breath that in a way combines body and mind. And I've heard you say before also, and I think this relates to what Rinpoche was saying in terms of the Rushen, which is we have things that are stuck and there's stagnant in our body, and the movement allows them to free, whether it is, as Rinpoche was saying, kind of the mouse aspect inside, the lion aspect, and in this tradition, all these different kinds of beings that are in us and freeing them. So movement as freedom, but without, in a way, losing a sense of grounding. Does that make sense in the way you relate?
Definitely, definitely. One beautiful quote that I use a lot is come from Ida Rolf, who developed Rolfing and structural integration. And she was a friend of Moshe Feldenkrais, and she presented herself as his student, although they very briefly met. And she has a saying that goes, "The issues are in the tissues." And many times I believe that the modern psychoanalytic approach and the Freudian direction fails because of that, because the access is to the wrong storage, to the wrong hard drive. Oftentimes we don't have access because the memory and the way that we encapsulate experience and the conservation of impressions and who we are in many ways is stored within the body. And of course, to be able to even work on that layer, you have to go to movement, and and that unlocks many things. And a body, once I met a psychiatrist and he asked me, "Have you ever been depressed? Have you ever experienced depression?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Of course, you move way too much for that." There is something about movement, even when it's very simple, without much instruction, that does so much for us and cleans us and mobilizes aspects that are hard to touch and brings to the surface, etc. But having said that, there is also the traps and the pleasures and the likes and the dislikes and the orientation of the body, which is also corruptive, not through lies or the same tricks of the intellect, but through its own tricks. And that's important to mention. because in many ways there are physical aspects in our physical culture these days which have developed tremendously. And we have next month the Olympics here in Paris. They are happening right now. And the records are being broken and incredible performances. But then what I refer to as movement development and development of self-practice, this in my eyes have taken a back step, tremendous back step. And people are disconnected from a sense of body, a sense of movement, and a sense of practice as well. Not just those mediums, but practice has other mediums as well, and it's suffering across the board.
Yes,
Thank
maybe
you.
this thought about, if you can say a little bit more, that the earlier, as I was saying, like some traditions, like in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, where there are these movement practices, but in application, it's not widely spread or widely practiced in everyday basis. So people do have a lot of physical issues, even a good practitioner, knowledgeable. But on the contrary, also in the West, sometimes people are into overly identify with their body. So they identify with the body so much, but their sense of self, they have totally lost. So their body is themselves. Their six pack is who they are. If one pack is missing, they're part of one part of their 1/6 of they are gone. So you wanted to see somehow how to bring these balances, is importance, that body is the way to find yourself and mind is the way to exercise your body, so that they both are way to each other to make it both in union as a full. So if you can say a little bit about that, but that would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that really touches the practice side and the education of how to construct one's practice. And I think that you're doing a fabulous job in that area through your perspectives and approaches, and with ancient tools that are also brought into a modern light these days. And that's another beauty in the Tibetan culture, that allowed that interfacing with the West in a very different way. And I think I've also learned from the outside and through the experience that I had a lot about practice, also through observing and reading and learning certain aspects from Tibetan practices and physical practices, but not only. And getting stuck on the body, or getting stuck on the intellect, or getting stuck on the emotional layer, all of them are possible traps, and possible traps of identification. And I think what helps is to first form a certain relationship with practice before you form a relationship with the medium or pursue it only. So the body, for example, the aesthetics of the body can be respected, and they have even some correlations with health, but even health is not a good direction that can draw us into identification. Even health and longevity, which sometimes are presented as higher or loftier, they are as low as any other orientation, the beauty of the body or a six-pack. When you are learning concepts of practice, how to approach yourself, discovering yourself, evolution of oneself, the peeling of the onion, and you use various mediums, and those mediums are being replaced also often, being taken away from you, like certain toys that are being given to you, but then they're being taken and replaced by other toys. This is what I use to prevent those traps from forming. So even, for example, I purposefully changed myself, like my aesthetics, my physique. For example, I am 15 or 17 kilograms, I don't know, 35 pounds lighter these days, to make a point, also to make a point about muscles and about, identification with that, or certain images of movement, or taking the shirt off, which I used for many years to manipulate certain opinion and manipulate certain exposure for the benefit of my real practice, the in-depth of the practice. And by doing that and educating others about it, I think that we have a better chance of avoiding the traps and going around them. I teach someone comes to me and just asks to learn how to do a handstand. So I totally support him or her and provide the best tools and take them through that journey. But there will come a moment where I would say, now enough with the handstand. Now let's go somewhere else. And maybe in the beginning, that somewhere else might be very shiny as well. So it's a gradual process until we can go to something like a weight shift or a breath hold, or a very simple expression, or a certain somatic experience of how you experience your face or your elbow, and people would be able to relate. And on the way, they would discover so much about their deeper sense of self, I believe. That's what I've been using.
Wonderful. I love that expression, the issue is in the tissue, and the aspect of getting stuck, whether it's in the body, in the energy or the mind, which in the Tibetan way, it's this sense of grasping, right? So Rinpoche, when now you're bringing these movements in early morning in our retreats, do you feel that it has to do also with this issues in the tissue and kind of move it and let it go? And then from there, now we come back to the teaching and the sitting in a different way. Does that make sense for why you're doing, or where are you coming from? Rinpoche?
Okay, so where I'm coming from, it's very, very simple, very basic. Our community in the West, generally, people who are following teaching and Dharma are getting older and older. And there's not less and less new generations coming, for at least in US and countries. Some countries, they're more mixed, but other countries. And our older practitioners are having a harder time to get up from the cushion, and they begin to identify with that. They begin to say something like, "Oh, this is the age, and this is in this age. This is what happens. I have a problem with the knee, so I cannot move. So you guys can go, and I'm sitting here." So I think one thing is having some issues with the movement. It's okay to have it, because if you have not moved long enough, you have those issues. The worst part is when you're identifying with you're unable to move. Is this the real problem? Because then what they're really saying is, this is it. This is my end of my life. This is end of my body, which is not true. Body is so flexible. Body can learn so much within so short period of time. And they really have to trust themselves. No matter what age you are in, you can still work with your body, and every single movement of the body will help you, every elevation of your awareness in a different level. So I think that it's important to our group to understand. So I feel the same way. I'm paying a lot of attention to my sleep. I know when I lack the body movement, I know my sleep quality will be different. I know my mood will be different. So there is no way to compromise the movement as long as you have the body. And then the other part I also trying to emphasize, when I'm emphasizing the body movement, I'm saying not after, at the same time, you have to look into the mortality of the body part, an eternal sense of your spirit, the eternity of your spirit, mortality of your body. That awareness has to be simultaneously practiced, because one day you will not have the same body, same capacity with movement with your body, and even to the point one day it will be end of your body. And that moment, it's your body is gone, but you are not gone. As long as you know your body is not you, you never end, you never finish. And many people, when their body finishes, that's end of themselves, and you don't want it to be there. You wanted to educate that simultaneously, body and the spirit, they're always together, they always door to each other, they always support each other.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rinpoche. There's actually a question from the audience, from Brenda Bork. And interesting enough, I think even though it's asking you, Rinpoche, I think it could be for both of you. And she's saying that, she does some tumo movement exercise, and she's been getting a frozen shoulder. And as she does this, she has some sciatica that, it's hard to meditate. But it seems that the frozen shoulder, the way she expresses it, it's a pattern. And it has made me nervous of exercises. She says, I'm in the early 50s now. What suggestions would you or Ido have? I think you're muted.
Ido, if you can please answer, that would be great.
Okay, that it's very tricky to answer such questions, right? In a general, like without knowing the person. And well, I would actually start from a certain educational aspect, actually, and that's usually my suggestion in such a case, which means it's an information gathering phase. It's time to understand, to get to know. To get to know the disease that the person has, and not the person that the disease have, in a way, to understand what is that shoulder, what is exactly going on, and that can be through observation, paying attention, which motions are bringing the pain exactly, and which are not. And that part of spending a week or two observing that and experimenting and looking, is it overhead? Is it when the arm is behind the back? Which is it this movement that is bothering? And that would be an important first part. And then from there, naturally will start to come and arise certain solutions and certain things that we can practice. One practice that it is very basic practice, but I highly recommend it to people, is to hang. And that is, you can start by hanging from one of those support poles that are on the sides of sidewalks sometimes, or in buildings. And you can just simply grab that very sturdy pole and lean backwards and just relax. And later, slowly, you can reach something overhead, like a bar or a pair of rings, or in the playground, and slowly start to hang and spend some time there. Maybe in the beginning, it's just 10, 20, 30 seconds. And this relaxed thing, as opposed to doing pull-ups and strength exercises, this is very helpful with all kinds of shoulder injuries. And if practiced well enough, I recommend to people to accumulate time in that hanging position each day. So if they have a playground next to them, or they can buy a chin-up bar to put at the house, and if they can spend 5 or 10 minutes of accumulated time over the day in sections of 30 seconds or a minute later, it can even reshape the bone structure. And this has been used by people for a long time, because we are also meant to brachiate, to hang, to climb. This is part of our vocabulary. As kids, we all play in the trees, when that is, of course, accessible. And that brings back the function of the shoulder and can help with lower back issues, with nerve issues, etc. But first, gathering some of the experience with what exactly is going on, and that is something very personal. It doesn't have to happen in words or medical definitions. It's a self-experimentation, which I'm suggesting here.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm sure that will be very useful for Brenda. Thank you. Rinpoche, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think wonderful what Ido said. So I think nothing more to say, and I would do the same thing without further problem.
There is a small challenge that I gathered this information many years ago, and I put it on my blog with various exercises, videos, and it's called the hanging challenge. And if you search online the hanging challenge Ido Portal, we had the participations of tens of thousands of people from around the world, and I've received thousands of thank you letters from people canceling surgeries after doing this for 30 days. It's an incredibly potent and simple practice. It might sound funny, and it might sound as if it's something too soft, but it is a very potent practice when you follow it and gradually build it up. And my mother, who is practicing with me in her 70s, she's practicing hanging, and everybody that I meet that have issues with the shoulders, and pretty much everyone can benefit from this.
Recommend, like in terms of as you're saying, increasing the time, what would be the limit of time that you wanted to increase? You don't want to go more than that.
Well, this can be taken to very extreme ways, because we have such an incredible capacity to hang in a relaxed fashion. But people in 30 days to build up to this 5 or even 10 minutes of total hanging time, accumulated in small sections. So maybe they stand up, they go to the kitchen, and as they pass beneath the door frame, they hang another 30 seconds. This is where movement practice is not fitness practice. This is the issue, is people have a workout approach instead of an integration of a movement practice, how they experience their body and their physicality, which is interlaced throughout the day. The same problem that I'm sure you are meeting in your field of practice, where the practice can become too official instead of the importance of the unofficial practice. So sometimes people tell me, why do you practice so many hours? I still practice 8, 10, 12 hours a day, officially. And I tell them the reason is very simple, because I'm aspiring to practice 24 hours. Anything less than that is not a real practice. So the concept of a practice is, of course, have to transform. This is not a workout, and it starts with little physical gestures like grabbing the bar and hanging, or squatting, which I'm doing right now as we're talking. I'm on the chair, but I'm with my legs on it, and I'm squatting. So this gives me an opportunity to help the body get another type of movement.
Well, that's wonderful. So this part that you said, kind of practice, is 24 hours. And in the Tibetan tradition and others, we talk about this aspect of formal practice and informal practice. So Rinpoche, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, and how this, and I like this word Ido that you use, because we also use it, it's integration. So it's how do we actually use the formal practice that we do and integrate it into the rest of the day, so that it's not just that whatever hour of practice and then 23 hours of what, but rather what happens altogether. So Rinpoche, maybe this is for you as a way of how do we integrate our formal and informal practice?
Well, I mean, in my own personal experiences, when you are doing any movement or even simple walk, that if you're just walking, of course, you can just walk and um, feel the sky, expose your eye to the light, feel the breeze of the air, feel the energy. Of course, you can do the what we call integration with the elements. It's a beautiful thing. But as a human, as we are a little bit greedy, so you need a little bit more than just elements. So sometimes for me, I listen to a lot of things in books or something like that. Listen, so when I walk, when I'm listening to something, then I can walk very, very long time. So it's, and also in a gym, when I go to the gym or something like that, doing different movement, I don't just to do the movement, I also just to practicing, kind of meditating or reflecting on something. And end of the one exercise, I come up with some reflections of my life and then put it down after when I'm taking a and break in between two exercises or something like that. So my mind is always actively, cognitively engaged while I'm doing the movement. For me, it's helpful. I know I have a friend who said, "Oh, when you're doing the movement, you just focus on doing the movement." I get that part also, but I I'm able to do more my physical movement when my mind is creatively engaged into some things. This is just personal experience.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to get Ido back into some of the things I heard from the Huberman uh, interview with you. And since Rinpoche mentioned the elements, I wanted to talk about if you can share about the environment and not just external environment like this, which is beautiful, but also kind of environment in general. And this, I think you called it big frame, small frame. So if you can talk a little bit about that, if that makes sense in this part of the conversation.
Well, the concept of big frame and small frame is not necessarily related directly to the environment, but
Okay.
it is more a way to discuss with people, orienting the body spatially, moving the body in space, as opposed to another mode of more micro movement, of moving the body inside its own frame. Very small movements that are happening without big displacement in the space around us, in the environment. And those small little movements are actually the building blocks of the big movements, the spatial movements. But they have been neglected, they have been abandoned, they are underappreciated. And we are suffering because of it tremendously and unnecessarily. So, for example, we are educated to chew with the mouth closed. But in reality, the mouth is the mouth of an omnivore. We are supposed to chew in a very three-dimensional fashion. If you'll go to Africa, you will see that in every traditional culture. So by this limitation of how even we chew, we start to experience all kinds of problems with our jaw, with with headaches and migraines, with tensions around the neck, etc. These little movements are not so easily conceptualized, so it's very difficult to bring them back as well. And they are present in various yogic practices, like, for example, if you look at the Indian Kechari practice, working with the tongue, and I'm sure there are various Tibetan practices that are less known that are also working with those aspects. Another example would be
James Nestor, in his book, there's a whole chapter called chewing. It was related to the breath, how our breath and chewing as also relationship there. Yeah,
definitely. there are a lot of manipulations and possibilities to heal. Even holding the mouth open for periods of time would baffle people what it can do. If your mouth is held open for you for a certain amount of time, or if you do it by yourself, there is a process that the body will start to unravel. And this is it's just a question of time, because so much tension and the issues are in the tissues, as we said before. And we are holding a lot of things here in the jaw and in the tongue and around the mouth. And the breathing is affected, the freedom of the breath. And the breath affects other areas. We are breathing 23,000 times a day. So let's say you have great movement practices and you do them for even 6 hours a day. But if you do not transform the way that you breathe, then habitually it's almost impossible to truly transform yourself. The breath will always drag the posture back. The breath will always drag certain digestive problems back and lower back issues back often. And people, again, have a limited point of view of what it means to practice. And the small movements can go into the ribs or into the shoulder blades, like this little movement. This is the inner frame movements. And they are not sexy, and they are not popular, and they cannot be captured on Instagram easily and transmitted. And hence, we are losing them. And when we go for the big movements, for the outer frame movements, which I can do, and I come from that background, so I'm speaking from a place of experience. So maybe a backflip or a handstand or a sprint or a pull-up or whatever, then these motions are actually built up from those small elements. And if the small elements are not there and not working correctly, we are compensating, and we are destroying our bodies by doing these big movements. And that's where the bad rep of movement and fitness comes from. Because people know that if you don't move, you'll have issues and pain. And if you move, you'll have other issues and also pain. And the middle ground is very hard to find.
Yeah, talking about pain, I don't know. I saw one of your YouTube, I don't remember which one, that you're talking about you make your students suffer or something. I cannot remember exact phrase, but and also which is a very important part, and I think one of the Muhammad Ali, I think he was talking about how much push-up you can do. He said it doesn't count until I pain. I have a pain. Until you have a pain, it doesn't count. So pain is clearly either is a physical and either is emotional. In Tibetan tradition, the Milarepa story about asking the student to build things and destroy, just basically giving such a hard time. In the West, it will say abusing your student, right? You get immediately probably sued for that. In ancient times, they were also part of the method, that testing their ability and pushing to the point that it's necessary to push to feel those challenges or pain. So how would you work with that in a balanced way so that.
Yeah, it's very true what you say. And I think that our relationship to suffering and to pain is to blame. And I think the other side is maybe using now pain as a disguise by certain teachers and suffering. So when I say I make a student suffer, the meaning is not for any personal gain besides that own practitioner. And that has to be extremely clean and extremely honest. We have to provide some kind of a gain to it. But having said that, suffering is the nature of being here. There is something to the nature of being here in collision, and getting free from suffering passes through a lot of suffering. And the suffering is, for me, as the actual method behind transformation. It is the friction of the making of oneself, of the discovery of the self, of these deeper recognitions of who we are and what we are and where we can go. And to say that the method is pain-free, or another thing is to say that the system is totally safe, is meaningless. No system which is useful is totally safe. If certain measures are not taken, the system has great risks in it, and it has a potential danger in it. For example, Tumo is an extremely powerful practice. And if you don't work with it carefully enough, you can create some issues for yourself. And I've experienced it before. So that is first to place this honesty there. And then to look for the right type of challenge, which is maybe a better word, and especially would be less emotionally loaded for people, the right challenge for the next piece in the puzzle in their development. So the certain pain and suffering has to be taken into account into what is necessary. For example, when I recommended to Brenda, I think it was the name, to hang, there would be aches and pains. For example, the skin in the hand she would feel, and the grip would burn. But then it will provide certain benefits, and she will get stronger, and her shoulder hopefully will get better. So then that infliction of that suffering is correct. Where people miss the boat is on deeper development of the self, where they want to rid themselves of certain traumas or from being locked within the head and in the intellect, and they don't understand that a similar mechanism is applied there, just like the training of a muscle. And there has to be a certain mechanism and a certain process to work through that. And that is why we also have those beautiful opportunities to face challenges and to experience pain. To experience pain is a gift, and it's a directive. And it's a beautiful thing if we can change our connection to it, I think.
Yes, in our tradition, clearly, it's very important. It says that if you don't face your suffering, you can never overcome suffering. If you don't face your pain short time, then you will be able to overcome your long time pain. So sometimes not facing it doesn't mean you don't have a pain. Pain is still there. You're just not, it's not surfacing, you're not facing it, because your way of saying it's not there, that doesn't work. So somehow, I guess, not physical, emotional, relationship, any human issue that has to be faced to overcome, not denied to overcome. There's just no way.
One suffering these days that I see many avoid, and maybe they don't encapsulate or conceptualize it as that, is boredom. Boredom is incredibly important to work with, and it is a suffering of a sort that we are really losing in modern times. We are all the time getting ourselves busy with something and can very poorly interact with a scenario which is boring. So this is something that I use a lot with the practice of people and for their benefit. And of course, if you want to get stronger and you go to the gym, what will the gym make you feel like? It will make you feel weak. As you lift the weights, you become tired and you feel weaker. So you connect the sense of feeling weak in the training with the concept of getting stronger. If you want to be interested, how will the training make you feel? Bored. Through the same exact mechanism. So this, just by opening people's minds and inviting them and educating them and guiding them through a practice of something like indulging or bathing, as I say, in boredom, or what Huberman, Professor Huberman talks a lot about in the neurology, what is called limbic friction, that effort to focus. To focus is painful. And it is painful for a while, for a long time, and for most people, they never see the other side of it, which does exist. There is a critical mass that can be built up with focus, as you know. So that is, again, this is where people are, I think, suffering unduly. And this is the other type of suffering, suffering from a second degree. Instead of the immediate suffering, which should be more promoted, the raw suffering. They are suffering in an inhuman way.
Could you tell us a little bit about what would be a practice of bathing in boredom? I love that, but how would you, can you explain a practice with that?
So, for example, someone would come to me, and you see behind me those sticks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would take such a short stick, for example, which is an exercise that I use a lot with people, and I'll ask someone to balance the stick, just like so, to keep it on the fingertip. And this is nice and fun for a minute. But sometimes I will do it for an hour. And it would be a meditation of a sort. It would be, I wouldn't call it meditation in the traditional sense of what meditation is, but I would call it as a mental developmental exercise. Because the person that comes to me would be able, almost everyone would be able to balance the stick for 30 seconds without dropping it. But the moment we go into 10 minutes, the mind shifts would become apparent, and you can hear it because the sticks fall on the ground and they make incredible noise, and everybody becomes kind of, they are being very triggered by those. And then this is an example of a very boring bathing in boredom. And maybe the next time we practice, I would do something extremely exciting, but very painful, as a contrast. And by taking people through such a journey, and with years and years and decades, I have students who are decades with me, you start to construct a totally different sense of self and a relationship to pain, to suffering, and to everything else, really.
Wonderful. There's a question that might be pertinent here from Yvonne Davide. And Yvonne is asking, could you talk about cellular memory in relationship with trauma and emotion? And I will bring in, does this kind of practice in bathing in boredom help with something like that?
Well, we've already said a few things. I don't want to go into a technical discussion of it, nor am I qualified to describe it. But funny enough, I don't think anyone is truly qualified to discuss it. That's the funny thing. We don't understand memory. There are some things that we know about memory, and there are some things that we know about intelligence, but we are having more difficulties, and there is more unknown always than known, and it shall remain so, I believe, in my sensation. So I think this is very important to put as a base. Memory is not as simple as what we feel it is, like the computer's memory. There are many traditions that work from memory into the transformation of the self, into the practice of union. That is another door. Like the Western traditions in Europe, the ancient Western traditions worked a lot with memory, the memory palace, and other practices. There are also, I'm sure, in Tibetan practitioners who specialize on memorization. So this is one area of memory, but how do we develop our sense of our lives and the sense of ourself? That self-referential loop, as Hofstadter calls it, that thing that is there when you don't look at it and is fully functional, but the moment you look at it, it disappears. And it becomes this loop, or a strange loop, he calls it. Memory is very tricky. Memory is stored everywhere. Sometimes you get a massage, or you bang into a door, and all of a sudden you recollect a moment from childhood. That's where it comes from. Sometimes you have a scent, you smell a small little exposure of a certain smell, and a memory comes from years before. The physical practices, they give us a chance to interact with a lot of these little molecules in us, these little joints, these little opportunities to release these stored memories. And that's why somebody who is dealing with a lot of repression and trauma can benefit from moving a lot in diverse ways and in new and novel ways. This is important. People know about moving more. They know they should move more. But what they are missing, they're always moving in the same ways, going on a walk, or another one goes to swim, another one goes to the gym. And where movement practice, the way that I see it, part of the education is to create opportunities to move anew, to move in new, but also anew, and to renew yourself. And that is extremely powerful. And again, lost. When you live in the mountains in Tibet, every step is fresh. Every foot placement is different. The elements are so present, and we have to interact with it. Every difficulty in our environment pulls this out of us. But the comforts these days of our modern life asks us to bring another suggestion, another opportunity. And that is something that education and the practice can bring to light.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Ido. Rinpoche, you mentioned James Nestor, and of course there's not only there, but in the Tibetan tradition, so much about breath. And Ed is asking about some insights into what happens with our awareness and attention once we slow down the breath, maybe even moving towards 1 breath per minute.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just say a few words about the memory first. So idea of, in Tibet, if you look from Tibetan perspective, we talk about karma, we talk about karmic traces, so that something, many lifetimes or past life, and also something that childhood memory, as Ido was talking about, banging on the door or getting massage, some from tissue, some memories are coming out. But like the idea of also that every cell has a clock, circadian rhythm clock, that these internal circadian rhythm clock, I'm sometimes quite impressed with, when I wake up in the morning, 5:30, 5:33, even I trying to change different things. I thought it was a different, it only is like 5:35. It was just always, that internal clock will tell you when to wake up, or it will put you to sleep when you're supposed to go to sleep, if only you don't interfere the natural rhythm of your body, because which we always do interfere with technology, with social jet lag, like you have sleep at a different time and so on. So I think it seems like the idea of this memory is very, very interesting. So as far as the breath is, some point that when we think about the breath, according to the Tibetan tradition, I think when we think about the breath, very often we think about rhythmic breath that Ido is referring 23,000 times a day that you are breathing. So this rhythmic breath that you are having. And when we are doing Tummo practices, when you're holding for a few minutes, so sometime during those few minutes, you're not breathing anymore. So you're breathing less, as James Nestor talks about it, that you have 5.6, 5.5 breath per minute or 6 breath per minute. So it's the different numbers of the breath changes. So some sense, when only all these counts only in relationship to, well, you have a body. We're always talking about as if we have the body always, but those count of breath doesn't count, no longer important. When you lose your body, when you are merged into your eternal existence, eternal self, 23,000 doesn't matter. You don't need this breathing, because your level of the breath existence is so much subtle than depending on oxygens. So I think in some sense, when we go into the deeper meditation, sometimes there are moments where a breathless, there are moments where selfless, there are moments where a feelingless, there are moments where thoughtless. So these lesses are sometimes very important part of the higher meditation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rinpoche. There's another question that I think I don't know if you can answer now or maybe something very simple on it, but Eric Sheets is asking how can he learn to work with Rushen? And I know it's very complex in a way, but maybe there's something simple that you can say to that.
So first, I think maybe instead of thinking of getting into the practice or something like that, maybe Google Guru is there. So you can ask Google Guru and get some information, intellectually gather some information, some history, some practices, some different traditions who are practicing, what it means to practice and success of the practice or challenges of the practice. I would learn more of that. And then if you're able to do that, then that point probably you know what to do next step.
Thank you, Rinpoche. And I know we're coming to wrapping. Ido, there was something that so many things, but one of the things that I enjoyed listening to you is about this writing and let go, crumbling and let go. You write, and you mentioned coming from the Jewish tradition and this intellect, and there's something about this intellectual and then this crumbling and letting go. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is refers to our modeling things. There is a good quote that I like very much. All models are wrong, but some are useful. and that touches that. It is very important for us to systemize things for the intellect. The intellect has this dissection quality. It likes to dissect everything. It will dissect and destroy things for us eventually. But it cannot be, the process of denying it, this dissection, is not befriending it and not calming it down. And hence, I feel there is a good practice in modeling things, systemizing things, putting them for yourself in writing, but then taking the piece of paper and crumbling it and throwing it away and making a new one, another model and another model. And this gives us both the grasping aspect to the aspect that needs it, because our day-to-day requires these dissective tools. That's why it keeps drawing us back. But on the other hand, it teaches you to free yourself up again from it and to let go. And this is also in regards to what we said before about certain traps and addictions that can develop with the physicality or even longevity, even living, the grasping of living, which touches, interesting enough, the concept we just discussed, the breath. That need to breathe is actually perhaps the most primal and experiential aspect of the need to live. So when there is an overcoming of that, of the breath, and there is a breathless state, or a slowing down of the breath, or a diminishing of the breath, or a very weirdly stretched and chaotic breath, you are starting to interact with something very deep that is in relation to being here in this body, the very outskirts of the physical experience. That is why I'm also a very much believer in breathing practices and are integrating them a lot. So yeah, I hope that that puts some thoughts into that, some coherency into that.
Beautiful. Rinpoche, anything on that? My thought was also going to a sense of, as you have models and you crumble them, there's a sense of what sometimes you call these spontaneous wisdom. But either that or wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I think in human experiences, we go through them, right? We have expectations from each other, and those are kind of model, those are structure, those are predictable behavior of pain identity. You do something, you say something, you expect something, then you realize that is not the case. Then you feel reactive, you feel emotion, and then some point you have to let it dissolve. It doesn't matter anymore, as long as you can maintain some sense of love to your child. It doesn't matter they learn, they don't learn, they're healthy, they're safe, you love them in the end. That's what really matters. Or if your friend, in the end, who is right, who is wrong, what we're supposed to do, not supposed to do, all these expectations from each other does not matter. What matters to maintain that a genuine respect to the individuality of the others. In those kind of relationship last towards someone and toward yourself too. But when you have this rigid structure that is supposed to be only this way, then you don't have to become spontaneous. It destroys you, basically. The structure will be destroyed. Structure will become self-destructive. It will destroy itself, and you have nothing to rest on because you have never exercised the non-structure, the boundless, flexible, behavioral aspect of your existence. It doesn't exist for you. You only exist in structure.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you both. I also want to actually thank people that we don't see in the screen, because Milos, who's our technical support, Polly, who does so much to support CyberSangha and her team, and also Summer from Ido's side, who's been great in helping us communicate. So I want to thank everyone, and particularly, of course, Ido and Rinpoche. This has been a wonderful dialogue. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Thank you, Rinpoche. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day and a great full moon day.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the CyberSangha podcast. If you'd like to learn more about CyberSangha, visit us online at cybersangha.net.